The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas and Herho. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Dom, I like how that intro rhymed that time. That was really nice.
Yeah, well, I realized I didn't intend it, but when I wrote it, I ended up writing a rhyme. My wife's a poet, so maybe that's why I did it and didn't know it. Catch that rhyme there?
However, she doesn't like to rhyme.
Yes, she's one of those poets that I don't read. And joining me also on the panel again is Pat Scott. Hi, Pat.
Hi, glad to see you all.
Yeah, and Pat, as we introduced last week, is joining us on the Secrets of Tech. Hopefully, we can get her on as a regular participant in the panel. We're still looking for one other person that we can add. We can have 3 rotating panels. That would be nice. And just to remind folks, Pat is. Your business is helping people with technology, specializing in older folks. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Okay. Most of my clients are above 70.
Yes.
But I've got 70 all the way to age 100.
Wow.
So, but I do have
Nice.
Other people as well, but that's the majority of my clients.
And Pat is my mother-in-law, so she is the mother of the aforementioned poet in my house. So it's,
she got all the talent, not me.
Well, different kinds of talent. So let's jump into today's topics. Our first segment tonight is about this story that I saw in my local hometown paper, the Boston Globe, about Fortnite addiction. Now, most everybody probably who listens to a technology podcast probably knows what Fortnite is, but just in case you're coming at this new, it's the big game of the moment. It is the big game that all the kids are playing, especially. And what makes it different a little bit is it's available on every platform. It's on the phones and the iPads and the computers. And so lots of people can play it everywhere, and kids are going crazy for it. And the way it works, the basic game mechanic is it's group play, so that you're not just playing against the computer, you're playing against and with other individuals, human beings. You're dropped into an arena where you have to gather resources, weapons, and other things to survive and kill off the other players. And the arena shrinks over time until there's one player left who is the champion of that game, and then everything resets. So the game is free, except there's in-game purchases. You can buy things, everything from resources, shovels or things to build with, to things like dance moves and costumes for your avatar. And you'd think that wouldn't make a lot of money. That's $1 billion. They did $1 billion last year. I think it was some crazy. Maybe it might not have been $1 billion, but it was in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars last year. So big business, big game. So the story is that there are kids who are suffering from, mostly boys, who are suffering from addiction related to this game. They're not sleeping. They're avoiding school. They're dropping out of social activities. They are, and then they of course they give some of the extreme cases. A kid who was so in the grip of the addiction that he used a bat or something to break into his family's car, break through the windows to get his phone out of the car so he could keep playing. So they talk about, the addiction, kids who are suffering, etc. So before I get too much further, any initial thoughts on the story of Fortnite addiction and game addiction from either of you, or to sort of introduce the topic? Anything you want to jump in on?
I have a brother-in-law who suffered a game addiction, and same kind of thing. He was playing World of Warcraft back when he was in high school, and he almost didn't graduate his senior year because he would go to school and then leave school to come home and play while his mom was at work, and then go back to school at the end of the day to be picked up.
Wow.
So, it was a very serious issue. And when it finally did come to light, he had to do a lot of remediation, go back and talk to a lot of people and get back in their good graces. And he ended up being one of those people that like burned all contact with it and will not touch it again because he knows how seriously addicted he can get to it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, now to say that he is now since become an Army Ranger, and he's very serious. He's made a complete turnaround in his life, if you want to call it that. But
wow,
yeah, so it's not something that the kid can't come out of. So there's a positive spin to put on the back end of it.
Sure.
Well, I don't have any personal knowledge of it with clients my age group, probably. But I just reminds me so much of what I heard in Japan, that there were a lot of people, this was a year or so ago, that wouldn't come out of their rooms. They stayed playing the games and had stuff delivered and died without people even knowing they were there. So it sounds like it's another more immediate form in the U.S. than what they were seeing over there.
Yeah, so I can also speak to from a bit of personal viewpoint. I've never experienced addiction to this level, but it's been. I've had times where I've had games that I had a hard time disengaging from when I was in college. I remember playing Marathon. I don't know if you get the old game. It's sort of the precursor to Halo and all those games.
Halo. Oh my gosh!
I mean, I would go to sleep and see the textures from the game on my eyes. Yeah, in my dreams, like on the inside of my eyeballs. I mean, I was obsessively play it. I don't know that I was addicted, but I was obsessive.
To be fair, that was a great game. So
yes, it was a great game.
You're excused.
But even today, there are certain games that I've had to take off my iPad. For instance, Star Wars Force Arena. I had a lot of fun, but it gets to the point where, it's hard to progress. It's the early levels, early stages are great. You go and you go and you go, and then it starts getting harder and harder to progress unless you succumb and just spend $2. Just spend $2 to get those resources, and then I've already spent $2 to get here. I might as well, I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I'll spend another 10, and soon you're spending money that you don't have. I mean, I've heard of people even mildly obsessed with these games spending hundreds of dollars on them. And the fact is games where the freemium model of these games is it's based on the fact is they can make more money on selling you stuff in the game than they can by just slapping a $50. If these games are $50 each, they would make less money than they're making now. But if they put a $50 price tag on it, no one would buy it.
Right. And I think that's I like the freemium model. And as a person who is really into games development, there is a whole series of conversations about this on YouTube with extra credits, where they talk about how the freemium model it works, how you can break it really easily. And the thing that Fortnite got right is they balanced everything out very well, so that the freemium model does exactly what it's supposed to, which is no one gets an advantage. No one is ahead of the game. You might get a temporary advantage. You might be able to buy a short, burst of advantage in the next round of play, but you can't just win the game by outright paying money.
You can't buy the win. Right.
Yeah, it's not a pay to win, and that's one of the things that they've done exceptionally well. And then they've made it so that the things that they are marketing are these viral things. That the dance moves, for example, are just everybody knows the dance moves. All the kids, I can't stop the kids that I teach from doing these dance moves.
Same here in Cub Scouts.
And my kids at home, who've never played Fortnite except maybe once or twice at a friend's house, they know all the dance moves.
Right.
And so I can just see them if they got the game. It'd be like, oh well, I want the dance moves, Dad. Could you just buy this one or just buy that one? And I have one kid that he's very smart with his money, and he would make sure that he saved up to buy the things that he wanted from the game, and he just would. Whereas he probably wouldn't buy the game if he had to buy it outright himself.
And the fact is that these games, it's not by accident that it's designed so well, the freemium model in this game. I mean, the freemium model is nice in one sense that you can get to play a game, try it out without having to spend money. You could try lots of different games without having to shell out a lot of money. The other side of it is they've these companies hire psychologists. They have people on staff. They have people the same sorts of people who create each summer's viral pop hit. And I'm sorry to tell you folks, but that's what happens. That song you're going to be singing in 3 months, you can't stop singing in your car. That was manufactured so that it would happen to you, to be viral. I mean, right now, industrial psychology is a huge thing, and they know how the addiction centers in your brain work, the reward centers in your brain work. And that's one of the things that they point out in this article that I'll link in the show notes. Points out is that the really bad stuff doesn't happen to everybody, obviously, but for kids especially who already have personality issues or mental health issues or behavioral issues, this just goes even further. They mention that for kids at a certain age, our brain has something called a variable reward system, where we respond to rewards that are not the same, but the more we do something, the more reward we get, that sort of thing. So their variable reward system is hyper developed at this age of say adolescence, but their self-control system is not, which is kind of obvious to anybody who knows adolescence. Self-control is not really there yet, and so they can't balance it, and so it gets worse. And that's the thing that really it hurts, is that this is hurting kids especially. And
right. If you want a really good look at it, there's a great TED talk by Tom Chatfield. I think that's his name. Mm-hmm. And he goes through talking about World of Warcraft, which is, I already mentioned my brother-in-law had been addicted to that one. And the way he talks about exactly what the psychology was. So they sat and watched all of these people playing, and they figured out that the variable reward system basically works on this concept that there's a frustration level that people will get to where once they can't open a box with a reliable percentage chance of getting something, they'll just stop playing. And in order to avoid that, they'll have you go out to get 10 items, and you open the first 8 boxes and it's got a really difficult chance of opening it. But then once you get to that 8th item, those last 2 items seem to come in really fast.
Right.
And it tricks your brain into feeling like, well, if I can just get over the hump, then it'll be easy, smooth sailing from there. By rewarding you with that particular behavior, and then suddenly you keep playing, and so you got the 10 items. Now you go out for another quest. It's exactly the same quest. Go get 10 of these things, and if you think about what you're doing exactly the same thing, and you know exactly what the result's going to be, except that it feels very variable, and it feels like this natural, intriguing thing that you want to do. But he goes through the psychology really well. He talks about the psychology. The great thing about it is he talks about how to use that in our everyday life to kind of gamify what we are doing in our life and how we want to make
to accomplish good things.
Right, to accomplish good things, to do something effective with it. And so I think that's a good thing to kind of take, to know that this is going on, but it's also advancing psychology in a really interesting way that we can use for a good cause.
Mm. Yeah, I recall like there's some games that aren't as well designed, and the one I played recently where. And in fact, I've played several like this where it's this sort of variable reward system, but there's no real game mechanic other than click the button. Like there's no skill involved in advancement. Right. It's just ratting them, at the little lever, pushing the lever. And if I just push the lever enough, it's going to reward me. But those ones, I suppose, for a more immature brain or less developed brain, that's might be enough to keep dragging somebody in. But as an adult, I'm like, this is stupid. I'm not enjoying this. I'm just I'm farming this.
Yeah, Farmville.
Yeah, right. Well, Farmville was a sort of a lot of those games, early Facebook games, had elements of that in it. Farmville was an early version of this sort of thing. And again, well, I mean, that's maybe something we talk about. Is this sort of game inherently bad? Is it immoral? Should we not have this sort of system, or is it, let the free market decide, but we've got to take responsibility for ourselves? What do you think about the freemium game model versus the pay to play?
That's a hard one, because I can see that there are going to be other situations in life that children need to know what to do with frustration levels and that type of thing, and how to manage their time and all of these expectations. And so you want to develop that. On the other hand, it hardly seems fair for the amount of trickery that goes on with the periodic reinforcement and the unpredictable nature of it. That's what we're looking for, is something that's not predictable. Mm-hmm. And one of the articles was saying a lot of this is built around that apparent unpredictability of the game, that you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So you just keep going.
Right.
And it does seem unfair that that's done. And I don't know. I know Britain even was, one of the articles I was reading was saying that they were investigating this even 2 years ago, trying to look to see, are there some laws we need to pass? And I'm not much on law passing like that. But what do we do with this?
Right.
It's like gambling. Do you outlaw it, or do you say, let's manage it?
Right. Do we say 21 and older, like we do with a lot of these things that are like gambling is 21 and older? Where it's legal, you have to be. Some places it's 18, some places it's 21, I guess. But where it's legal, we require that you have the maturity of an adult.
Right.
Generally
speaking.
Well,
in fact, one of the things that was suggested in one of the articles I was reading was a rating system, for the game to say not just violence, but other things that might make it of a certain age and not for younger age. That's a possibility.
Right. And even with a really good model game, like a subscription-based game, I think there's a danger in it, because you have two things going on here. One, with the Fortnite, it's not just a game that you're playing by yourself. Right. And so I think that you're playing with other people. So there's constantly a challenge to be with and to beat other people. And it's very much different than a slot machine. And that's why I think a lot of people don't want to compare it to gambling, but it's a lot like a blackjack table.
Yes.
Where you have a group of people that you're playing, and you always just kind of want to outperform the other guy. Yeah. But the house always wins. And that's what these kids aren't learning appropriately, is the house always wins.
Right.
So Epic Games, which actually came away with near $3 billion in profits last year.
Okay, that's what it was.
So
yeah.
Wow. $3 billion in profits last year, not entirely from Fortnite, but mostly from Fortnite. The house wins. Like, the kids are having fun. That's great. But you do have people that are ending up in this addictive pattern very early in life. And it's very hard to change that. And it's very likely that that's going to either persist in that particular state or change into something else. But then also, the company's going to make money off of it, and they're going to keep making money until they need to make a new game because Fortnite's too old to be interesting anymore.
Right. And to be clear, the business model itself is not necessarily what's causing kids to be addicted. It's the way the game is designed, but the game is designed to feed the business model. If it were a pay to play, they could still make it addictive in order to keep people playing it so that they can encourage us to buy it. So I'm aware of that. So I want to kind of shift a little bit to feedback we got from a listener who had something on a similar note. And she says, smartphones and kids, the topic is smartphones and kids, especially ADHD and Asperger kids. She says, we have a 14-year-old ADHD son with traits of Asperger's, and we had to get him a phone for marching band, because he's, they need to be in touch with them. He needs to call them for rides, that sort of thing, I gather. They use an app that everyone had to have. Oh, okay. So the marching band uses an app probably to organize the band. He's absolutely glued to his phone all day, and when we try to take his phone away, he gets almost violent, to the point where the only option we really have is to lock him out of the Wi-Fi and shut down his data from the provider's site. Anyway, she says, if anyone else has similar issues, maybe you can include this in the show. So I think this is related. It's this addiction to the tech, and why this is happening, especially for kids, again, who have already certain pre-existing
conditions,
some predilections toward certain behaviors, repetitive behaviors or obsessive behaviors, and it's a real danger. And the manufacturers are giving us tools. Apple now has screen time and other tools where parents can limit the amount of time the sorts of things that the kids can do on their iPhones. I know Google has got something like that too, but it's still kind of tricky,
disturbing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and one of the things that I had seen as a suggestion is at a certain age, you don't introduce necessarily smartphones to children. You give them a flip phone that they can use for that vital communication. But you said the team had an app that they needed to use. Yeah. And so that kind of killed that. So
one of the things I'm running into as a parent of kids in this age group, just a little younger than this 14-year-old, is how often people assume your kid has a smartphone at a very early age. Even in Scouts, it's not so bad in Scouts. But I see the other kids, I look at my boys, and they're like, oh, you don't have a phone? You know, they have phones already at 10 and 12 years old. And my kids don't have phones. As much of a tech head as I am, and maybe because I am, they're not.
It's because of how much of a tech head you are.
Yeah, I think so.
You know better.
Yeah. So it is difficult. So the marching band itself is part of the problem for this case. I'm not sure I have any solutions. If there are parents out there who have encountered this and had some tips, I would love to hear from you what you did that was successful. That might be good tips.
Definitely. I'll say for my end, I have a 13-year-old who just got her first email, and we set it up with Google, and we set it up in the way that it's a parent-child account. So she is my child on the account, so I can log into it. I see any updates. If she logs in from a new device anywhere, I get a notification from it. So there's that's a really good option. If you have a 13-year-old and that's the way you want to play that. And then I was really impressed because then my 11-year-old going to Scouts needed an email address to be able to receive emails about his events that were coming up. And I talked with the Scoutmaster a bit about it, and he said, well, I would really prefer that it be his email because he needs to be responsible for checking up on it. And so I reluctantly agreed to get him an email address, but I was super impressed when I went to Google to sign up the same way. I have now an 11-year-old's account, and it really does function as an 11-year-old's account. So
that's good.
He has to log in, but then I also have to log in.
You have to prove
to be able to prove that it's him logging in, and to make sure that I know that he is logging in.
So you're a second factor authentication.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Wow.
I'm the 2FA right there. And it's great. I love that. I was not expecting that level of depth from them, but honestly, they're trying to cover themselves because there's a rule about the minimum age of having an email address. But I was really surprised at the granularity between a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. Google's there.
I've run into that myself. So my 12-year-old, we have got her a Chromebook, and I think I was my pick of the week a few weeks ago. I set her up on the Google Family link with an email and account, and excuse me, and she wants to email something to Grandma, and I had to approve who the recipient was, but we want to install apps on her device, and I can't. I just can't find a way to do it.
Right.
And it is a little bit limiting, and I'm afraid of people going beyond the system to try to get it to work. So I wish it worked a little smoother, but I'm glad they're doing something. And I think part of it is a reaction to the fact that kids are being given these devices and expected to have this sort of communication at a younger and younger age. I'm a little surprised that the Scoutmaster insisted on your son having his own, I'm just assuming your son, but having his own email address, because usually that's frowned upon because they don't want adults having one-to-one contact with kids.
Right, and that's all of the emails that come in are
they're CC
group emails. Yeah, it's a group system. That
comes in. Okay, yeah, so, I figured the Scouting is actually really pretty good about explaining how all that's supposed to work. So that's good.
Right.
So we had another link. There's this website, westartnow.org, which kind of talks about helping parents through a lot of these issues, and some of it's better than others. But there was this one story that was on it that really struck me, and it comes from I think an issue with technology that girls tend to deal with more than boys do. Boys are more about obsessing about the games. Girls have another more relational issue, which is developmental, where when girls get on these social media apps or even on texting, they begin to become so attached to one another that they have to be available for each other on a constant basis. And this one story talked about how parents found their 16-year-old daughter using her phone at all hours of the day and night. And so they told her, okay, the rule is no phone in your bedroom at bedtime. And she just couldn't deal with it. And she got angry. She cried. She would start sneaking the phone in. Well, they found out that she said that she had to stay up and be available at all times in case her friend needed her, because her friend was ideating suicidal thoughts. And so they stopped and they talked to her about, okay, if your friend is ideating suicidal thoughts, this isn't on you. We need to get some adults in her life involved. And they got her some support. But then they kind of talked about just in general how these girls, they feel this social pressure to be available to their friends on a constant basis. And if they don't respond immediately to texts, or it is interpreted in a certain way, and it's another kind of tech addiction. Any thoughts on tips or anything like that when we want to help parents deal with it? I mean, mine is if you can, nip it in the bud before you get there. Just don't let them, from the beginning, if you haven't yet given them a phone, I think as Pat said, maybe when they have a phone, get them a phone that can't do the smart texting stuff, or start from the beginning, have this contract. This is when the phone is on the charger. This is where the charger is. This is when you're allowed to use the phone. And then maybe from the beginning, kind of talk to them about the problems that can creep up when you do make yourself available on a constant basis and all that sort of stuff. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things that the parents in that article mentioned, which I thought was really good, was that they allowed her to blame them, to say, okay, the phone is not usable after 7 o'clock at night. And I'm sorry, there's no exceptions. Blame us. We're the bad guys, right. And it makes you look fine.
My parents
You're
are
not
lame.
Responsible. Yeah. They said that's their rule, so she's not responsible for that rule.
Right. It's the emoji high roll emoji. Parents will let me get on after 7.
Right. Yeah, you understand. Yeah. Well, and yeah, that's I thought that was very reasonable.
That's a good one.
Way back when we first got computers in the house, I saw this problem occurring then with computers that parents would put them in the child's bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
We always have them in the open area. And it was everybody, and maybe phones should be the same way. They are only usable out in the open areas. And at a certain time, they go off. And that's it, just get that started before it ever becomes a problem. It's like putting a child in a seatbelt from the very beginning. Yeah. You don't have this problem then.
Well, and you also, I think I'm gonna say something unpopular. You have to model the right behavior.
Oh, yeah.
True.
And that's a big issue with us that our generation is coming into, this is our adolescence with these devices, and we're trying to learn how to do it. And I know I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else, but, my kids are talking to me and I pull out my phone because I just got a message that I had been waiting for. And my kids are sidelined for me to take care of this rock that I had in my pocket. And that's behavior that you're modeling to your kid, and that your kid then feels, oh, well, I'm responsible to all of the things that are going on my phone more than, the people that are right here beside me, or more than even me myself. So
that's true. Yeah, there are. I mean, you may have to do cheesy things like the basket in the middle of the table that all the phones go into at the beginning of dinner, or I mean, that could seem cheesy, but
it works.
It could work. Certainly vacations, maybe, I don't know what the coping mechanism is, buy cameras, digital cameras. They're still available. You can still buy digital cameras, and that's what you take pictures with. Otherwise, the phone is not available. The phone maybe even stays home.
Maybe an hour at night, or that type of thing to catch up with somebody, but it's away the rest of the time.
Right. Those sorts of things. I think those are good tips. So if anyone listening, they have anything that's worked for them, successful strategies, ideas, or ways that they can cope, we'd love to hear them. So if you could send us an email to technology@sqpn.com, or to tweet us at SQPN, or go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, and find the link to the show there. And any of those places, send us some feedback on what you think are some good tips for how to deal with these things. We would love to hear that. So I'd like to move on to our second segment today. This is a bit of a fun little story. It turns out that Burger King is trying to develop a meatless burger, the Impossible Whopper they call it, that tastes, smells, chews just like a real burger, indistinguishable even from the experts. They tested it on the people who work for Burger King, and they couldn't tell the difference. So what do you think about this? So would you, just from the beginning, and they're testing it in St. Louis area, 56 restaurants. So I haven't been able to try it yet. None of us live in that area. But would you eat it if it were available? Pat, how about you? Would you eat an Impossible Whopper?
It wouldn't be my first choice, but for curiosity, I would try it. But if I thought that it was more healthy and tasted the same, why not? But I don't know. It just sounds a little squirrely.
Okay. So we're assuming that there already was meat in the burger, right? And not that this is indistinguishable because it's exactly the same thing.
Right. No, this is made with, I'm trying to remember what they said that it was made with, but it's all plant.
It's all plant-based.
No meat in there at all.
Yeah. No, I think I read Super Size Me a few years back, and if you haven't read that, or not Super Size Me, I'm sorry, Fast Food Nation was the book.
Right.
So the video sort of version of this was Super Size Me. Fast Food Nation is an incredible read, and it's all about how fast food is made. And probably my favorite bit is he goes to the flavor factory for McDonald's, and he's walked through the whole thing, and the scientists are like, nobody really knows, nobody can know what all of these things are, but the scientists who really work on this stuff took him to this downstairs room, and they gave him a vial and said, try this. And he's like, what is it? And the scientist said, if I did my job right, I shouldn't have to tell you. And then he drank the vial, and he said he tasted everything down to the sesame seeds on a Big Mac.
Yes.
And
wow.
So if you're under any disillusion that you are eating food that is not so heavily processed already.
Right. It's mostly corn to begin with, right?
Right. I think that this is just them admitting finally that this is the way that things are going. But no, I really wouldn't have a problem with it, honestly. There's so much that goes into food production, and I am a big advocate against the agribusiness model of having a cow in a box for its whole life,
right? And
then it eventually becomes a hamburger. So if we could do something to move away from that in an ethical and also an economical way, I would really think that's a great thing.
My concern is because from a plant agricultural point of view, our most of our agriculture in this country is corn. We grow it to feed to animals, but also to process into nearly everything else you eat. And I'm very hyper aware of corn products because my daughter has a corn allergy, and it's in everything. So my concern would be is if we just substitute cow for corn,
right?
And we continue.
Lucy still can't eat it,
right? Well, and we also we have even more of a corn monoculture where if something ever came along and wiped out the corn crop, we'd be in big trouble as a country.
Yeah.
And also that it because you're only ever planting one thing in all the fields, it means the fields get denuded of all of the nutrients from the corn, so you have to keep adding it back in through artificial fertilization. Michael Pollan's book, what was the one? It was I think it was the first book, Omnivore's Dilemma, was a good eye opener for me on that one. That was also a good book. And speaking of the Flavor Factory, America's Test Kitchen has a podcast called Proof, and they did a 2-part episode last fall, I think it was, on they went from the Jelly Belly jelly beans. They have this line of them where they have like the weird flavor ones, like old socks and stuff. And so how do they make them taste like these things? And so they explored the whole industry. There's this giant industry of flavor makers, and that whole thing where they can make in a lab using just chemicals, make anything taste like anything. So this burger may be a bunch of cardboard that has these flavors sprinkled on top. We don't know. I mean, in fact, it occurs to me that the big challenge in this was making the texture right and something that you could flame broil and it survive.
And there is a concern, if it is all chemical based, what reactions will these chemicals have on a population that already has a lot of allergies and food sensitivities?
Right.
And you don't know what it is. And that's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then there's the big question, which is, does a meatless burger that's indistinguishable from the real thing violate the Friday fast? This is the Catholic question.
Oh man, that's a phenomenal question.
What do you think?
Well, I don't know. We used to make curry carrot walnut burgers for Fridays during Lent, and it was a burger, but it was all,
But it didn't taste like a burger, was it? Did it?
No, it didn't taste like a burger. It was great. It tasted wonderful, but it tasted nothing like a burger.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. Are you really giving anything up at that point, right?
Well, and interestingly enough, in reading over this, what we were going to be talking about, I found an article by a vegan who was talking about what do you vegans do for Lenten fast. And they talked about, well, if you're a vegetarian, then you might say for Lent, don't do eggs, do the Orthodox fast.
Right.
Don't use oils, don't use whatever. Make it about the meaning of changing your lifestyle, not necessarily punishment, but changing it so that you're aware of what's going on. And so in that spirit, it would violate the Lenten fast for me.
Yeah.
Because you're not really changing what you're doing, and we need to change our habits.
That's how it came out to be. You need to be aware that you're giving something up, and you're giving it up for a reason, but you have to feel it. There's got to be, in the same way that if you're eating lobster on Fridays in Lent, you're not really observing the fast very
it's
much.
It's not the same as tuna fish.
Something has been lost in translation there, right?
Right.
Well, and talking about this too, on the topic of fasts and creative fasts, one of my priest's friends, he is shaving his beard for Lent. That's his thing.
That's
He's
different.
shaving every morning, waking up and shaving. And he told the congregation this. He started it off, and a couple of days into Lent, he had one of the parishioners walk up to him and say, Father, I was inspired by your alternate, and I have made my own. I used to wear a nice polo to work every day, but instead I am ironing myself a button-down shirt every morning before I head out to work. So,
wow.
There's some
changing
creativity
habits.
to it.
Changing,
We're no longer obligated to observe the meatless abstinence on Fridays throughout the year outside of Lent, but the church does ask us to make a sacrifice nevertheless, and so maybe some of these things are ways that we can make sacrifice. And frankly, eating a meatless burger might be that sacrifice for me.
Just thought of it.
So I am interested in this. When it comes available in our area, I may try one. I'm not a huge fan of the Whopper to begin with, so it comes in at a step lower to begin with. Every vegetarian burger I've ever eaten has been more like a hockey puck than a burger. So I'm very skeptical that it would be something I would try more than once. So we'll see. We'll have to see what it's like. And if any of you listeners have tried it, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you thought of it. And if you're in the St. Louis area, you happen to be lucky enough to try it. So great. So let's move on to our third segment, which is our picks of the week. And I want to go to Pat. I'll let you choose first. What is your pick of the week, Pat?
Well, I do a lot of visits to homes in which people are web browsing, and they have all of these ads popping up and all of these things that they accidentally click on. And so my pick of the week is the ad blocker that I choose, and it's called AdBlock Plus. Free, works on all browsers, on all platforms. I've tried it on Firefox, on Linux, and as well as Mac and PCs, Edge, Chrome, all of them, at least all the ones I've tried. It's very simple. You go to adblockplus.org. And when you go there in a browser, it offers you a button just to put it in that browser. And at that point, you see a little stop sign, a red stop sign up in the top. And as you go to each website, it shows you a count of all the ads it's blocked. If you decide that you want to see the ads on a particular website, all you have to do is reach up and punch on the button for, on that stop sign, and then it gives you a chance to turn it off. And it turns it off for just that site so that you don't have to keep turning on and off the ad blocker depending upon where you're going to. It remembers that you've turned it off for that website. And so it's a very simple, easy to install. It's very easy to say, I want to allow my bank to have pop-ups that aren't really ads, but they look like an ad. And it gives you nice stats so you can see what you're gaining. And it speeds up your web browsing, as well as blocks a lot of the malicious ads that get put into your browser as hijackers. And I found my clients that have the ad blocker, they don't have the hijackers that I see on other machines.
A lot of times with the ad blockers, if you go to certain websites like a newspaper website, they'll say, the pop-up, a big thing says, you can't read this unless you turn off your ad blocker. So you just whitelist that site. They have an ability in the button. You click the button, you say,
you just click the button, turn it off, and it remembers it.
Yeah.
So
those aren't the sites you usually worry about. There are a couple of news sites I don't go to because they're really bad about it. But that's a good pick. I heartily recommend AdBlock Plus myself.
And when a website has more than 35 to 40 ads, I've decided it's not worth going back to.
Yeah, gosh.
Yes. Yeah. Great. That's a good pick. Thomas, you have one.
Yeah. So tagging up on my last was the affordable home 3D printer. So I decided that I would go with the thing you can actually get things to 3D print from, which is a website called Thingiverse. I think I mentioned it last time, but just to kind of follow up with it a little more, it's an open source sort of a group of people that are 3D modelers that are sharing things that they've made that you can then go 3D print. And the best part about it is that a majority of them are 3D printers as well as 3D modelers. So you're not going to get a file that's modeled well but doesn't actually print well most of the time. I will add the caveat there that sometimes you will get one that you'll go to put it on your printer and it looks terrible or it just does not work.
Right.
I had that issue recently. I did some minifigs for Dungeon Scouts, and I printed them all up. I ended up printing 40 of them, and the hassle of trying to pull away the supports on some of them and breaking as many feet and swords as I did was terrible. So you'll if you do it, you'll quickly find out which artists you like, and you like the looks of their models. But it's great. There's an app for it as well. So if you wanted to download the app and just search through some things on your phone, when you have a couple minutes of downtime, you can. Everything's indexed really well. You can look at the 3D model too and kind of zoom around it to see all the different sides of it. And it's a great community. So if you don't know anything about 3D printing and you want to go ask, the people will normally respond. The artists will respond with what the best settings might be for your printer or for a printer that you're going to be using.
Ooh, this is cool. There's a holder that snaps around your Apple Watch to put your AirPods in.
There you go. See?
Oh,
right there.
Man, this is dangerous. I may have found something I need to get. I don't need another gadget. Very cool. That's a good one. Thank you. And then my pick is going to be a little utility for Macs called AirBuddy. And if you have speaking of AirPods, if you have AirPods, and there are new AirPods available, so you might be getting some. But you want to use it if you use it with your iPhone or your iPad. It has that really nifty pairing thing where you flip open the lid, you hold it next to the phone or the iPad, you flip open the lid, and it shows up on screen. It says, you're now connected, and this is your battery life. And it's really the best Bluetooth pairing experience I've ever had. But if you want to use it with your Mac, it was the old clunky way, going in the Bluetooth menu and that sort of thing. Well, AirBuddy is a little app that runs in your menu bar, and all you do is you hold your AirPods up next to your Mac, and you flip the lid, and then you'll see the same little, it looks just like the Apple graphic, pops up on the screen, and then it gives you the button. Do you want to connect? You just click connect, and you're now connected. You can use your AirPods with your Mac. So really an elegant little piece of software. It's $5 from gumroad.com, I guess is where it is. So he does warn, just looking at this site now, he does warn that the new AirPods, the second generation ones, may not work properly with AirBuddy just yet, but he's working on an update to make sure that it does. It could, but it's not guaranteed that it will work properly. So, but I recommend that little piece of software. So,
cool.
Awesome.
I think that's it for our 3 segments this week. Before we sign off, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Technology. And today we want to thank by name Paul L., Terry M., Yvonne R., Dennis S., and Todd H. Through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give. They make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Technology in all the shows we do at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So, what did you think of our discussions this time? If you have any feedback you want to give, you could go to sqpn.com/technology, like I said before, or the SQPN Facebook page. Leave us some feedback there, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com. Please remember, if you can, to like the episodes on Facebook, to retweet them on Twitter, where we're at SQPN again. Leave comments. All those things help the engagement numbers, and they get the algorithms going to say, hey, people like this, we should be showing this to more people, and that helps us grow the audience. Also, if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the show so that you get every episode as soon as it's available. They usually come out Thursday afternoon, and you can subscribe in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on YouTube, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. If you can write a review in iTunes, we're a brand new show. Every 5-star review helps us, again, get that algorithm juiced up and showing us to more people. And above all, sharing the podcast with your friends. We don't grow unless you help us to get the word out. That's the only way we can do it. We're not a for-profit organization. We're a non-profit, and we rely on your generosity, both of time and financial support, to do what we do. So we greatly appreciate that. So until next time, Pat, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Technology.
Thank you for having me.
Thomas and Herho, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.